physical part first, and emotional, personal, all the rest of it part second in that expression. But for the Jewish people, it's reversed. The physical part, that's kind of secondary to that whole personal aspect of the wholeness of who a person is. So put your bodies, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Sacrifice for the Jewish people tended to mean, again, most concretely, the animal sacrifices that were offered, or offerings of grain and that sort of thing, but the physical sacrifices like that. And for animals, it was their lives. But so their lives were taken. But what Paul wants to emphasize here is the sense that when we offer our bodies, offer ourselves, it is a living, life-giving sacrifice. It is, it's not just dead flesh, but there is life that we offer. And then he goes on to say, holy and pleasing to God. So that in the Jewish law, there were all kinds of ways to tell whether a sacrifice was pleasing to God. You follow those laws. And so Paul is talking about the sacrifice, offering the sacrifice of our bodies, of ourselves, is according to what is pleasing to God, your spiritual worship, the next phrase. It's interesting, the word worship, is latreia in Greek. We see that word in an English word like idolatry, which means worship of an idol. And so this is worship, but it's logikon. It's the word in Greek looks like logical. It's a logical worship? No. Again, he's reinforcing the sense this is reasonable. This is according to what it means to be human. That this is fully realized worship that we offer as human beings, blessed by God, according to the mercies of God, that we offer. This is what we have, and this is what we have to offer. And this is what we have to offer. And we can, I hope that we can begin to get a sense of the Mass itself looming in the background here. That what we can see, that's what happens in the celebration of the liturgy, celebration of Mass. He goes on to say, do not conform yourselves to this age. That is the world in which we live in. Do not shape yourselves according to the strictures and demands of this age. Now notice how he shifts to a completely different viewpoint, turns it all upside down by saying, but, rather, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. It shifts interiorly, not just making our actions suit some kind of external force or demand, but rather through an interior transformation, not to say conversion. We could say conversion. I'll say conversion. That interior transformation, that is how all this is to take place. so that you may discern what is the will of God. St. Ignatius of Loyola made a specialty of the discernment of spirits. It is contained throughout Paul's letters, this hint of the necessity of looking at what God's will is. Spiritual direction, as far as I'm concerned, how I define it, is two people looking for the direction of the Spirit in one person's life. This is the discernment that goes on, that we might know what is the will of God. And what is the will of God? What is good and pleasing and perfect. Oh my. After all that, I don't have too much to say about, I don't have much time to say about the gospel. But I'll try to talk quickly. Try to listen slowly. The first thing I want to point out about the gospel is that there's a certain structure. This first prediction of the Passion in Matthew's Gospel fits into a certain structure. There was last week, there was the confession of Peter. And then Jesus says, on this rock I will build my church. Then there's the prediction of the Passion, and Jesus says, when Peter rebukes Jesus, Jesus says to him, you are a rock of scandal. He says, you're an obstacle in my path. So there's a little play on words there. The word in the translation is obstacle is sometimes translated as a stumbling block, when it means a rock a rock for stumbling. So rock. The next thing that happens, and then that's also followed with the direction to the disciples, take up your cross. Then comes the next thing, and the very next chapter, right after this, is the transfiguration and the role of Elijah. Elijah was to come before the Messiah came. Remember who was with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration? Elijah. Then comes a section of Matthew's Gospel that talks about the little faith of the disciples. Remember, it starts off with Peter's confession of faith. Now it talks about the little faith of the disciples, and then comes the second prediction of the Passion. That's the structure in which this first prediction fits. You notice how carefully Matthew wants us to attend, and he focuses on that transfiguration as being what gives the real light to understand the Passion, and also the struggle with the faith of the disciples. And so there's that exchange between Peter and Jesus, where Peter goes from being the rock on which the church is built to the rock of stumbling. Because it's difficult for Peter's faith at its state at this time to be able to understand what the Passion, the death of the Lord, means. That's why he says, you can't do this. No, that doesn't coincide with my understanding of who you are. And so the notion of resurrection, that gets swallowed up with the overwhelming sense of the death. And that's what Peter is having trouble with. But Jesus goes on to try to strengthen that faith and elicit that faith in his disciples by saying, you must deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. Here's what the implication is for the Passion, what it means. This is fundamental to the stance of a disciple. This is fundamental to the faith of the Christian. This is fundamental to who we are. It's in the light of that. And Jesus knows how trying that is, because as he says, whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What he's talking about there is the threat of martyrdom. Lose your life. But Jesus says, losing one's life does not mean death. And the way he's talking about it. Paul said, offer your bodies as living sacrifice. Living sacrifice. And that's what Jesus here, in the face of the threat of martyrdom, this is what the challenge is. To believe what he says about his passion, death, and resurrection. But they're still too early for them. They're still trying to understand. Finally, there's even the look to the eschaton, the last, the eschatological, the last things. Because Jesus finishes off that passage for our gospel on Sunday with, for the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct. We would probably say, we would say, we would pay all according to their conduct. But this translates kind of literally from the Greek, and so it might be a little bit difficult for it. Repay all according to his conduct. Pay all according to their conduct is what it means. That is looking at the end. Speaking of looking at the end, I guess we've reached the end of our time together. I hope it wasn't too wildly out of the way to talk about primacy and collegiality, but I hope that was helpful for you. And I hope that you can look forward with a great deal of delight to celebrating this coming Sunday. Okay. Thank you.